And good Tuesday morning to you. My name is Ryan Belmar. I am the owner and publisher of What's Up Newp. And joining me today here is our news editor, and it is Mr. Frank Prosnitz. And how are you, Frank?
I'm doing fine. How are you doing, Ryan?
I'm doing okay. And here we are. We have another interview ahead of us. The primary is now less than a week away, and people people have already started voting. I just wrote down a little while ago that as of today, as of yesterday, 102 people had already voted at Portsmouth Town Hall. So people are early voting, people are voting by mail, and hopefully they're informed voting.
Yeah, that'd be good. We're trying to do our best to help them out. This is another really important interview, I think, in what looks like a pretty highly contested race.
And we are interviewing all the candidates leading up to the primary. You can find out any of the videos on whatsupnewp.com. We have reached out to all candidates running for local office that are in a primary for Tuesday. We have had all on that have been available and taken advantage of the opportunity. And so we continue our conversation today. And we stay in Portsmouth, Tiverton, Little Compton. It is House District 71. They'll have a Democratic primary, and we are joined this morning, if we did everything right, by Michelle McGaw. Good morning, Michelle.
Good morning. How are you this morning?
I'm doing all right, and how are you?
Fine, thank you. Thank you. Excited about the next week.
Yes, it is a very busy week. And before we dive into next week and the weeks ahead, why don't you tell everybody out there a little bit about yourself, your background, and who Michelle McGaw is?
All right. Happy to do that. I live in Portsmouth with my husband. I grew up in Connecticut and went to the University of Rhode Island College of Pharmacy, and that's where I met my husband. And so I was just a baby. I was 19 when I met my husband, but we moved back to Portsmouth, which is where my husband grew up right after college. And we have been here since 1991. So for quite a while, we've lived in this community. As I said, I graduated from the University of Rhode Island College of Pharmacy. And so I've been working as a pharmacist for about 30 years now, nearly 30 years. And done all kinds of things in the world of pharmacy, whether it was working at a retail store or working at a hospital, and right on up to working within the managed care industry, where I really got an insider look at how insurance companies work and how they make profits and how they can prevent people from getting the care that they need. And about 15 years ago, really that hit home for me, and I decided that I couldn't do that anymore. It went against my principles. And so about 15 years ago, I left that position to start working in nursing home care. And I've been working in nursing homes ever since, trying to optimize the care for our elderly population. So that career change also allowed me to get more involved in my community. It was always really important for me to be involved in whatever community I was living in. But when I had a very corporate position, it didn't allow me for a lot of time to do that. And so I was excited when I changed my career path to also have time to spend working within the community, whether it was things that were important for my children, working with the schools, working with their sports leagues, whatever it was, it allowed me to get more actively involved. So I spent more time with my family and really was able to get more involved within the community. So grateful for that opportunity. That being said, so I was working very hard within our community, doing a lot of volunteer work with things like baseball. For example, I was there when the Challenger Baseball League started with Portsmouth Little League. And I continue to work with that organization as their volunteer coordinator and their concessions coordinator for their large jamboree they have every year. So working with the developmentally disabled community with youth. I've been doing that now for about 14 years. So anyway, very involved in my community. But after the 2016 election, And even leading up to, I was getting concerned about, I could see some of the changes that were starting to happen, and my eyes were really getting opened to the fact that just because I voted for people that I thought were representing my values, maybe that wasn't enough to get more actively involved. After the 2016 election, I think a lot of us were concerned. We saw that there were going to be some big changes happening coming out of Washington. And I really thought that states' rights had been talked about a lot in the previous administration. And I thought, well, there's an opportunity for us to make some change. Unlike a lot of my friends, I could not pick a particular area that I really wanted to focus on. There were too many things that seemed really important to me. Healthcare was important to me. Climate was important to me. Gun safety was important to me. There were just so many issues, and I couldn't just pick one to get involved with. But I ended up at a meeting of the Democratic Women's Caucus where I met women who had similar values, similar ideals to mine. And I thought, here's an opportunity for me to create real change. If I can get women elected to represent my values, then I can address multiple issues at one time. And so it was really through that work that I really became involved more actively at the State House. Since that time, I spent a lot of time advocating for a number of issues at the State House. What I found was that our representatives were not always representing the people of their districts. There was a lot of concern about making sure that you were making the Speaker of the House happy or House leadership happy. And for me, I know our current representative, I think that's what really sparked a fire for me to run. There was, I know you talked with Terry Corfriend and you talked a little bit about the Reform Caucus, and they made some very reasonable recommendations for rules changes. So much so, I felt so strongly about it that I did go up and testify for that. Both the Portsmouth Democratic Town Committee and the Little Compton Democratic Town Committee supported those changes. They passed resolutions saying, yes, we support those rules changes. And our representative instead told me that he could not support them because he was, in his words, 100% behind the Speaker. That really raised a lot of red flags for me. I thought, here are, you have a unanimous decision between Democratic town committees in 2 out of the 3 towns you represent asking you to support this. And he said no. And that was concerning for me. And then last summer when he referred to the Speaker as his boss, that was really the clincher. So for me, my race really started more than ago. Yeah.
But he's not running. So
that's correct.
What are the differences between you and your primary opponent?
So since that time, he has decided not to run for re-election, but has really handpicked who he would like to be the successor. And so my concern is that, if we have someone with a history of falling in line behind the Speaker at every step, and he handpicks someone who he would like to take that spot for him, my concern is that the same thing will continue to take place, and we'll just be continuing the status quo. And so that was my concern. When my opponent announced, that was immediately what I thought of was, well, my opponent has changed, but my message hasn't changed at all. We still need someone who's going to be out there working for the people of the district and not just stepping in line with whatever it is House leadership tells them to do. And then when I saw his campaign finance reports, really, that reinforced it all the more. When your key donors are House leadership, you have to think about who that person is going to be beholden to.
Ryan, you want to start
really
with a typical first question?
I'm sorry, Ryan, I missed that. Were you saying something?
Yeah, I think you got to turn your mic on.
Frank, I'm on a little bit on delay, so go ahead, please.
Okay, so let me ask you this. You're a member of something called the Rhode Island Political Cooperative.
Yes.
There's basically 24 candidates. You're the only candidate from Aquidneck Island who is in that group. Why don't you describe that group a little bit first, and then give us your top 3 priorities if you're elected.
Okay, happy to. So yeah, I was approached by the political cooperative last summer. They were looking for people who had values similar to theirs, people who were willing to make a stand for the people of Rhode Island and not just go along with what corporate lobbyists wanted to do or what House leadership wanted to do. And that had been, really my thought process and my inkling of why I wanted to run in the first place. So when I spoke with them, I wanted to find out more about what it was that they were looking to do. And the more I talked with them, these were people that I had known already anyhow. I had been working with them, whether it was through the Women's Caucus or whether it was through my advocacy at the State House. As I said, I was spending a lot of time there anyway. So I was meeting a lot of people across the state of Rhode Island who were really trying to create change and trying to uphold principles of the Democratic Party platform that, is really what drew me to the Democratic Party in the first place. And what they were suggesting was that we could run a slate of candidates that really wanted to uphold the principles of the Democratic Party platform. Things like, minimum wage changes or pay equity or making sure that people have access to affordable housing. Really, the values are that people who are working a full-time job should be able to afford a roof over their head, food on the table, and health care for their family. And that was what they were talking about. And that resonated with me. If I want to go out and create change or talk about some of these things so important and are not getting enough priority up there, I can't do it alone. I need to make sure that there are other people up there that are with me, right? Because one voice isn't going to change anything, but when you start to bring in multiple voices, and so if we can add in to, say, the voice of the Reform Caucus, who is looking for a more small d democratic and transparent process, we have that much better of a shot of changing the narrative. And so that's really, what made me decide that I wanted to run alongside people with the political cooperative, because we shared a vision for what is in the Democratic Party platform, and we are willing to speak up and ask for changes that are consistent with that. So
your top three priorities?
My top three priorities, number one, has to do with, a more transparent and democratic process. The first thing that we do when you get elected is that you go up there and you talk about how the rules are going to work for the next 3 years, the next 2 years. And I think the Reform Caucus was certainly on the right path when they did that, when they started at the last session, where they were talking about the discharge petition and making it easier for bills that have widespread support to be able to be heard and to be voted on. They were able to pass, get some changes made related to having time to read the bills. We need to make sure that that stands in this upcoming session. We shouldn't, our legislators shouldn't be expected to vote on bills, particularly if they have been amended, if they haven't had time to read them. If you're submitting a bill and so many changes have been made to it that when it comes time to vote, you don't even know if you should vote on your own bill, that's the problem. So I want to make sure that we carry that forward. So really the some of the things related to the Reform Caucus, I'd like to make sure that we are doing that. I'd also like to see things on the State House website that become more transparent and easier to use for people at home so that they can be a more active participant in our democratic process. So that's one of the things I'd like to focus on. Another thing that I'd like to focus on is climate. A big concern for me is that our Speaker of the House has said that there's nothing that we can do locally to impact climate change. And I have to disagree with him on that. I think we can all do our individual parts. I think each one of us has a role to play in combating climate change. But I think as a legislature, I think there's plenty that we can do. There's lots of opportunities for us to move in the right direction related to a more green economy. And I'd like to see us putting more focus on that. You know, last year, not one environmental bill was passed. And I think that that's unacceptable. You know, we have a looming climate crisis. It is on the minds of so many people that I talk to. And to say there's nothing we can do and not be making it a priority in our state house is a concern for me. And as a pharmacist, healthcare is also a big priority for me as well. You know, I've worked in this industry for a long time. I've seen what happens when people can't afford their medications. You know, when patients come into the drugstore and they have to walk away without their drugs because they can't afford them. And then I've worked in hospitals and I've seen patients end up in the hospital because they couldn't take their medications, and, you know, the risks associated with that. And I think someone with my background and experience who has worked, you know, from the pharmacy to inside within, you know, the managed care industry to see how they work, I think having someone with my healthcare experience will be extremely valuable. And I have thought that before COVID. And now that, you know, now that we're in the midst of a pandemic, you know, our healthcare issues are that much more pronounced. And I think it's going to be really important and really valuable to have people with some healthcare experience at the table as we start to address some of our healthcare concerns moving forward.
Michelle, and I apologize, I had to jump out for a minute. If you can do anything on this island, please fix internet on this island. I feel like
I'm so glad that you said that, because that is actually one of the things that that I would like to focus on. And you're not alone in that. That keeps coming up from people across the district. I'll tell you, I was out, you know, working, knocking on doors in Little Compton, and, you know, you have this database with all the, you know, I have on my phone a database of all the people I want to make sure that I get to talk to. And I get a certain way, you know, a certain distance away from, you know, Route 24. And all of a sudden I can't get access to my database. So I'm thinking I'm going to do everything, you know, and I'm not printing out all this paper and I have it all handy. And then all of a sudden I get out there and I don't have anything I need. And now I need to go back and print everything out. So you're not alone in that. I've had emails and calls from people who are in the same, you know, are feeling the same way. And I actually sent an email back to someone from Tiverton just last week, and we were talking, you know, he was concerned about it. And we were emailing back and forth a little bit about the bill that Deborah Giro submitted, you know, to create a commission looking at internet access and how we can make that more widely available. It's become, you know, it's definitely more pronounced with COVID. I mean, it's been an issue all along. Like you, Ryan, we have those same issues. You know, my husband and I work from home periodically. And so we had noticed it, and streaming was an issue. But now that so many people are working from home, now that, you know, we were doing distance learning, I think that issue has become more pronounced, and people are recognizing just how much of an issue and a concern it really is.
Yes, it's happened in the last 2 days for me, but it is what it is. It will get fixed someday. You mentioned the district in Little Compton. Wondering if you could speak to what you see the needs are of each of the three towns that you'll be representing, Little Compton, Tiverton, as well as Portsmouth, maybe some of the concerns, opportunities, and issues that maybe all of them share, and maybe that some of them have uniquely just for them.
Okay. I think that what I've seen from the people that I've talked to is that really there's much more that we share than we differ from. You know, we like with climate being a big priority for me, I've talked with people a lot on the doors, and it's a big concern for a lot of the people in our community. We have low-lying communities, low-lying neighborhoods in all three of the towns that encompass the district. And so people are worried about, you know, climate change related to sea level rise, but we also have farms in our communities, and I'm talking with people about how we have very significant dry spells, these droughts that we're having, and then all of a sudden these deluges of rain, and how that's impacting our local farmers. And I think that is something that is concerning, to people across the district, something that we all share. Other thing that I am hearing consistently across the doors and over the telephone with people is their concern about going back to school. It seems like every family that I talk to, really wants to talk about what that means going, as far as going back to school. And whether it's their children or whether it's their grandchildren, it impacts all of us. And people want to make sure that they have a safe way to send their children back to school. They're trying to figure out how this bus situation is going to work. How are they going to get their children to school? How do we get children, when we do send them back, with specific guidelines, how do we get the children to cooperate with what it is that we're telling them to do? It's really hard to get 5 and 6-year-olds to not want to be social and interact with one another and to try to keep their distance. And how do you do that, right? So it's something that has really come up in every town that I've talked to. So education, I find that is something that I'm consistently hearing from door to door. So I think that our needs, honestly, are very similar. I will say, one of the things that may be different is, road safety. There's been a whole lot of discussion about East Main Road and the potential for a town center in Portsmouth. And so there's a lot of discussion around what's going to happen with that over the coming years. I don't hear that kind of a discussion, for example, out in Little Compton. They don't have the same traffic concerns that we have here. So that maybe is something it's a little bit different. And the other thing that I hear more in Tiverton, I definitely hear more of a concern related to their budget process and their going back to school process, because they have been under such a tight budget crunch. They have some significant concerns that are warranted. They had to lay off a number of teachers this year, so parents are concerned about that. And so I think while education discussions are happening across the district, they're definitely far more pronounced in Tiverton than they are in, say, Tiverton Little Compton or Portsmouth, because of, everything that's going on from a budget perspective.
Michelle, when you take a look at the way the state has handled the coronavirus, including the back to school, are you satisfied with how the governor has handled that? And are you concerned that the legislature has had very little to do with the whole process?
So yes and yes. I have to say that I went, watching the governor in action, particularly as this pandemic, first hit Rhode Island. I think she did an excellent job of managing the situation. She was really tried to stay on top of what was a very difficult situation, trying to make sure that, people had access to PPE, making sure that people understood the messaging related to wearing a mask and social distancing, helping our small businesses, gain some of the access and helping people get greater access to unemployment. I think she did a really good job of trying to get that all under control right from the get-go. And so I applaud her for that. I appreciate that she does regular, discussions so that people are on top of, on a regular basis, exactly where we are, routine updates about not only the numbers, but what the state has been doing, what she has been doing, and how we're proceeding. So I have a lot of respect for what she has done with that. That being said, I was disappointed that our legislature just stopped meeting. I think there were a lot of things that got left on the table because they were not meeting. And, legislatures in other states were still able to get back to work and address some issues within their states. Our federal delegation went back to work. And I'm not really sure why our legislature was, kept away from meeting or working and passing legislation for so long, particularly during a crisis time. The fact that towns are expected to create budgets without having a budget, makes it extremely challenging for our communities.
Michelle, businesses are suffering throughout District 71 and across Rhode Island during this coronavirus. What do we do to help improve the business climate, help them recover, help them get through this? And what do we do for small businesses overall or businesses overall in District 71 to try to get us from always seems to be at the bottom of the list for business climate here in Rhode Island?
So, that's a big challenge, right? And it's a challenge all across the country. We are still trying to figure out our federal dollars and what we're going to be able to receive from them and how we're going to be able to distribute that. And I think it's really important that we make that available to our small businesses through loans or grants or what have you, that we have a process in place, not only for them to get access to that, but that we set up programs that make it easy for them to understand that they have resources available to help them through that process. Because historically, working through some of those processes to get access to that money, even if it's there, can be a real challenge. So I think we need to have the resources to gain access to that information. I think we should also think, we need to look at the fees and the taxes and those, types of things that are associated with these small businesses, and take a second look to make sure that we are doing everything we can for our small businesses to make it as friendly as an environment for them as we can, so that that they can thrive and so that they will be there when we come out on the other side of this. I want to make sure that we are doing everything we can to provide the supports for them.
I would be safe to assume that you are not going to be a supporter if Nicholas Mattiello is successful again in his election, and of course we'll look for the leadership. I'm presuming you're not going to be one of his supporters.
I think it's fair to say that I have concerns about standing behind someone who, there have been significant concerns. There's a number of investigations going on, and when we look at leadership, that's exactly what we're looking for. We're looking for someone to lead their way, someone that we can put our faith in, that we know is doing the right thing for the state of Rhode Island. And, there's a lot of clouds over our current speaker. And so I think we need to have a speaker that, the people of Rhode Island have some confidence in. I also disagree, as things such as climate change, where, he said there's nothing we can do. So we have some disagreements on, what the values and the wants are of the people of Rhode Island. And so, yeah, I think you're probably right. And when I talk to people on the phone or at the doors, I'm hearing the same thing from them. People are outright asking me if I will support him, and are looking for somebody who's willing to stand up and say, I've had enough of the status quo. It's time that we have somebody who's really looking out for the people of our district.
That seems to be a theme with the Rhode Island Political Cooperative. I think when I take a look at those running for the Senate, I believe in virtually every Senate leadership position, there is somebody from this political cooperative that is challenging them in the primary.
Mm-hmm. Right. That's true. And I think what we as a cooperative are looking for we're looking for, a government that's going to work for the people of Rhode Island. There's a lot of heavy hand right now, even from lobbyists at the State House. We talk about that on a federal level, but you look at what happens at the State House. You go up there to testify, and the first people to get priority to speak every time, and who are given more time than the actual people of Rhode Island to speak, are the corporate lobbyists. And I'm not sure why, well, I can't say I'm not sure why. I do know why, but it's frustrating to me that the corporate lobbyists come in and that they receive so much more priority from our legislators over and above what the voices of the people of Rhode Island have. And I'd like to see the people of Rhode Island have just as much say and for their voices to carry as much weight as lobbyists.
Michelle, I'm going to steal one of Frank's questions here that he usually asks.
No, you can't do that.
Good one?
It's an okay one. It's at the top of my list, and I want to be able to scroll down, so I have to ask you this one. So with all that said, do you favor term limits for legislators? And I'm going to add an addition that you just made me think about is, do you favor limits for held leadership positions?
So the way I see term limits, I think part of the problem with our status quo ongoing legislators is related a lot to campaign finance. And so I think if we start looking at ways to implement some campaign finance reform, that might change. We have some people who have been there for a long time who have very large war chests, and it makes it extremely difficult for someone who is a newcomer to challenge them, right? And so if we started looking at campaign finance and where that money is coming from, but also how much people can spend on campaigns, for example, I think it would really level the playing field, and you might see more of a turnover in our elected officials. But I think it's very intimidating for a newcomer to come and say, I'm going to take on somebody from the establishment who has tens of thousands, if not hundreds of $1,000s in their account to work against them. So I think term limits, I'm not opposed to term limits, but I think addressing some of those challenges related to campaign finance would remedy some of those situations. I don't know if that answers your question. Your mic is off again, Ryan.
Oh man, telling you, we're having little blips here. I think it might be across the state today because Frank seems to be having some video issues as well. Keeps coming in and going out. How about your thoughts on tax incentives to attract businesses? The governor as well as Commerce Department have relied upon tax incentives to attract businesses. Do you agree with that approach? Do you think we should be using that kind of approach to bring businesses here to District 71?
I'm not sure how effective those tax incentives. I mean, we have brought some businesses here. That's not to say that we haven't, and I know that other states do them as well. But when you weigh out what we are providing back to them as far as those incentives, are we getting a return on our investment? And I think that's not always the case. And so whether or not, I would have to look at each case individually to see if I thought that there was some return on investment on the incentives that we were going to give back. But I'm not going to across the board say, yes, we should absolutely do that, because I think it really depends on the scenario and the proposal at hand, whether or not it would be beneficial to us. One thing I would like to say is climate is one of my top priorities. I think if we are going to offer those types of incentives, I think we need to put some kind of a caveat on there that encourages them to promote some green infrastructure associated with that. So if it's a business that's going to come in and it's going to have a large parking lot, I think that there should be a requirement that parking lot includes some charging stations, or that there be some solar panels or wind turbines, or some green energy initiatives within the building of the structure that they're going to create. I think that if any incentives that we provide to them need to make sure that we are incorporating our vision for a new greener economy.
I got lost. The internet lost me for a little bit, so I want to go back to a question, and I also want to, but I want to follow up on this. You mentioned with tax incentives that they don't always work. Can you give us an example of a situation that it didn't work?
Probably not. No, I don't think I can do that right off the top of my head, Frank, but I can get back to you on that if you'd like.
Well, I probably can answer the question, but the fact is that often tied to these tax incentives are promises for the development of a certain amount of jobs. Mm-hmm. And sometimes that happens, sometimes it doesn't. Sometimes tax incentives are used as a gun to the head, like A.T. Cross, when it wanted to move from Lincoln. It was threatening to move out of state, and they got certain tax incentives. But I think you're right; each has to be looked at individually. I do want to go back to campaign finance, and you mentioned campaign finance reform. Mm-hmm. If you talk to John Marion over at Common Cause, or Phil West, who preceded him, they'll tell you that across the nation, our campaign finance laws are considered, our ethics laws considered among the best in the country. What reform do you think is necessary to make them even better?
I think maybe a limitation on spending, for example. I look at how much we spend on our funding, and that's a big barrier. Why do we need to create war chests with $1 million in it for a local race? I think that's. If Connecticut, for example, has a cap on how much each person spends, where they spend, I want to say it's, I think, $5,000, and then anything after that, I think there's a certain amount that is public funded for campaigns, and that's it. They're capped, and that's how much they can spend. I'd like to see something closer to that. The fact that we have an unlimited spending on this, in our campaigns, I think significantly changes the narrative.
Okay. I think it's probably room for reform. I'm not sure exactly what it is, but I think a lot of the burden falls upon the candidates and people in the public who aren't really pursuing a lot of the things they can in terms of campaign finance within the laws that exist.
That could, yeah, I'm sure you're accurate about that.
Let me ask you about Black Lives Matter and whether or not Rhode Island suffers from the same racial tensions that are prevalent in a lot of areas around the country, and if so, what should the legislature be doing about it?
I mean, obviously, it's rampant across the country. I don't think that we can say that Rhode Island is immune to what we are seeing, in every other state across the United States. There are a number of things that we can do to address it. I think we need to be looking at it as from a multifocal approach. It's not just criminal justice reform. It's not just police reform. It's, looking at our education system and making sure that we have a more equitable education system across our communities. I mean, it shouldn't make a difference what zip code you live in as to whether or not you're going to have, an adequate education for your children. So we need to make sure that we have equitable education across the state. We see disparities in healthcare services and access to healthcare and affordable healthcare. And we need to make sure that people across Rhode Island, regardless of whether they're white, brown, or black, have access to affordable healthcare. Housing, we need to be addressing some of the shortcomings in our housing. We don't have enough affordable housing, across the state of Rhode Island. And that's something that is significantly impacting our communities. And so when we look at, the Black Lives Matter movement, I mean, while, it certainly is a police, brutality issue in some cities. I think, we need to look at it as, making things more equitable for the people of Rhode Island, regardless of the color of their skin.
What would you do about police? Part of that movement is they say defund the police. They really don't mean that. They mean providing other resources for the police. Where are you on all of those positions?
Right. I think defund the police is a misnomer. I think really when you say defund the police, I think what they're talking about is letting the police go back to the police work. Right now, police are expected to do a lot of tasks that are not necessarily or historically have not been related to police work. They're asked to be social workers, as an example. So, we have social workers. They went to school for that. They learned how to work within the community and to address some of those needs. And I think we need to let them do that job. And, when we are asking police to be teachers and social workers and maybe, drug rehab workers, there's so many things that we are asking of our police. And when we talk, when people talk about defunding the police, what they're talking about is letting the police do police work and providing some of those resources to other areas so that they can help to address some of those other social issues that police are routinely being asked to take care of.
Michelle, how would you, or how do we as a community make District 71, Portsmouth, Tiverton, and Little Compton, just a reminder, some people don't know what districts they live in, a more attractive and affordable place to live for everybody, for families, for seniors, for all? How do we make it so families can be here, seniors can stay here, and et cetera?
I have a few thoughts on that. I'd like to start with roads because, that has certainly been, something that's been at the top of the news cycle most recently. Right now there are concerns about the Portsmouth area, down at the bottom of Quaker Hill and the safety. There's been a number of accidents down there. And so I'd like to see us really pursuing a town center project. It's been pushed off for, year after year. And just when we start to think we're making a little bit of headway on it, then we lose the funding again. But, I've talked with people who would like to see some sidewalks down there, people who would like to see crosswalks down there. We have an elderly elderly housing facility there. We have a number of another housing facility farther up the road on Quaker Hill. And those people want to be able to walk down and go to the market and do their shopping. Not really a safe environment for them to do so. So it would be great if we had a center where there were sidewalks and crosswalks that people felt comfortable, accessing some of the things within our town, which could be a town center. I'd like to see make that area a little bit safer for the people of Portsmouth. I would like to expand the internet access. It's a problem for a lot of us. For those of us working, who work remotely sometimes, we recognize just how challenging it can be. Why, we don't have fiber optic service out here. So we don't really have any options. We have really just one internet service provider that we can choose from, and they can charge whatever they want. And the service is kind of shoddy. And, what do we do with that? Where do we go with that? We don't really have a lot of resource in that. It's a take or leave it proposition. And so I'd like to see us addressing that issue for the people across our district. I'd also think that affordable housing is something that is coming up across our district. There's too many people who are finding that they grew up here, but are not able to stay here because the housing has become unaffordable. I talked with a woman just last week who is living with her parents. She would like to be out on her own. She'd like to be in a home of her own, but she can't be because she can't afford a house. She says, I make a good living. I have a good job, but I can't afford the housing in our community, and I don't want to leave. I want to stay here where my family is, and I want to be able to, enjoy the community that I grew up in. But people just can't afford to buy a home in our community or even to rent a home in our community. It's gotten very expensive. And so I'd like to see us addressing housing more so that the people of our community can stay where they grew up, so that our children can stay with their families and continue to thrive here.
How would you address the homelessness issue in Rhode Island?
Ooh, the homelessness issue. I think we need to, number one, we need to address where the homelessness issue is coming from. Is it a mental health issue, for example, or is it a poverty issue? And regardless of whether that is—
Some of that homelessness issue is a result of, if you talk to, and I talk to a lot of people who are in that industry, whether they operate the Warm Center down in Westerly, the Martin Luther King Center in Newport, the Johnny Cake Center, and you have they're looking now at their concern because of the pandemic and because a lot of people have lost their jobs, and a lot of people are sitting there trying to make decisions between paying the rent, paying the medical, buying food for the table, and frankly, during the summer months, many of them live in some of our campgrounds, and that will end fairly soon. So,
right.
You talk to anybody in that industry, they'll tell you that it's significant, and they'll tell you that. And I'm sorry that they sound like I'm preaching here, but it's something that you're passionate about. But there's some misinformation that people take a look. Is it a mental health issue? Is it this issue? In fact, these are people just like you and I, and
right.
and the line between homelessness and being comfortable is pretty thin. Mm-hmm. And so it could be technology, it could be the coronavirus, it could be illness in the family, that far more than some of the other issues.
Right. No, I agree, and that's what I was sort of getting to that. Like, it depends on what the initiative is, or what brought these people to homelessness. And I do think that for some people it is mental illness, and but I'm not discounting that it is a subset of that population. And I'm bringing that up only because one of the things that I had a conversation with just recently was the fact that we have, for our mental health population, we don't really have a place for them to go. We don't really have the inpatient facilities for people who are suffering from mental illness. And so I think that's part of the concern. You have patients who are not, they don't have access. We don't have the resources that we need for that population. But certainly you're right. There's also an entire other subset of the population who is, if not homeless now, could be one paycheck away. There's far too many people in our, in Rhode Island that are living paycheck to paycheck. They're one paycheck away from losing their house, losing their car. That's a definite concern. There's been some talk about eviction moratoriums, and, where does that leave those landlords? I mean, that opens up a whole nother discussion. And so I think it's something that, we need to be looking at, but I don't know whether or not, how feasible that is, because, it would have to work right on up to people, to landlords and their mortgages that are due, and what that does to the banking industry. And it kind of snowballs into a whole other list of issues. But I agree, we need to be providing some assistance for these people. If we can get more access to affordable housing, which we don't have enough of right now, I mean, that's a concern. But with everybody out of work, the pandemic has certainly highlighted many of the shortfalls that we have in the state, whether it's access to affordable housing or access to food, access to affordable health care. These were all things that were in the background, all things that I think we needed to be addressing as a state for some time now, that we have somewhat neglected to address effectively. And the pandemic has really brought them to the surface for so many people. And so now people are really starting to realize just how precarious a situation so many of our neighbors are in. And so I think it's time for us to start addressing all of those issues, and those are all things that are important to me. Honestly, those are all things that are tenets of the Democratic platform and part of the political cooperative's agenda, which is why I wanted to, be a part of that in the first place, was because we saw that even before the pandemic, that those are significant issues for too many Rhode Islanders that aren't being addressed.
And Michelle, well, here's a big one. Why or how do you feel like you'll make a difference if elected?
I think for me, I think it's important, and people are excited about the idea of having someone who's really going to listen to them and wants to bring their voice forward. I think being there and just listening, I think, is really, really important. I'm not going up there. I mean, I have certain things that I feel strongly about that I want to be advocating for, but for me, being a representative is about representing the people of the district. And it's been so important for me to get out and talk to people and find out what's really important to them so that I can bring their ideas forward. I think that makes a big difference, that I'm not going up there with my own agenda so much as going up with an agenda of bringing their voices forward. So I think that's really important. I also think that my experience in healthcare is going to be extremely valuable. I know, even in the past, legislation that was passed related to healthcare, I have found that there were some things that were missed, things that maybe didn't get brought up or addressed as part of the legislation. I work in nursing home care, and so many times when they pass specific legislation related to, for example, the opiate crisis and putting restrictions on availability of pain medications, for some reason, the whole discussion about how that impacts our chronically ill patients, patients with chronic pain, hospice patients, nursing home patients, for some reason, those discussions tend to get left out when we're looking at those things. And so I think it's going to be so helpful to have someone with some healthcare experience. So when we start looking at those bills, we can bring some of that information forward and really make sure that we're including not just our outpatient community, but our inpatient community and our chronically ill community into some of those discussions. I think that would be really helpful and valuable.
Michelle, just here's a crazy question. Future aspirations, are you going to be satisfied with staying in the House, or are you looking at perhaps a bigger career than that in politics?
I don't think I have bigger aspirations. For me, honestly, if you had told me 3 years ago I was going to be running for state representative, I probably would have, dropped on the floor laughing. It was never part of my agenda to be running for in a political election. So to say that I have aspirations to move on to anything greater than this, I can honestly say right now I do not. What's right now is making sure that the people of our district have a voice, that someone is there speaking up for them, somebody is listening to them in our community, and then bringing that voice forward. And I looked around, to be honest, I did look around for quite a while trying to find someone in my district that wanted to run. I said, let's find someone that can really do this. And I talked to a lot of people. I was out working in the communities of Tiverton, Little Compton, Portsmouth, working with so many people and talking with so many people for a really long time, trying to find the right person. And the more that I did that, the more people kept telling me, it's you. It needs to be you. You're the person that needs to be doing this. And honestly, that's why I'm running, was because, people kept telling me that they liked that I was listening to what they had to say, and they felt that my values matched in line with what their values were, and that they wanted me to run. And so I'm pretty much doing what the community that I had been speaking to has asked me to do. And so for me, that's my aspiration right now, is to be the voice of the people of the district.
Michelle, we hit on a lot of issues, a lot of topics today, but are there any issues that we didn't hit on, or any other thoughts or concerns that you have that you'd like to bring up?
No, but I just want to thank you for taking the time to talk with me and hear some of my answers, talk a little bit about why I'm running for office. I've been running for this office for quite a while now. As I said, I decided to run more than a year ago. And so I've talked to a lot of people across the district, and it's been really encouraging for me. You hear so much, when you're watching the news or you're on social media, you can really get a different perspective of the world, and it can kind of bring you down a little bit, and you think, wow, what is this world coming to? And then you get out and you start talking to people in our community, and you find out that there are some really great, really great people out there who are doing wonderful things for their neighbors and for their communities. Those are the values that I want to represent. That is what gives me the strength to keep going and talking to people. I mean, these are, running for a campaign is not, running for election is not an easy task. But every time I talk to people, I am, re-energized, because I talk to them and I find out that the people around me and the people in our district are really good people at heart that want what's best for their neighbors. They want what's best for the community and for the state. And it's just been a real honor to talk with them, a real privilege to meet with them, learn about what's important to them. And so I thank them for talking to me. Hope that they will vote for me to represent them, because it would be my honor.
And a reminder that the primary is coming up on September 8th. You can vote now anywhere in Rhode Island at your local and city town hall in the primary. Only in Portsmouth, Tiverton, and Little Compton will you be voting in District 71. And that's what Michelle is asking for your vote. Michelle, if people want to get in touch with you, find out more about you, support you, etc.
So I have a website. It's www.mcgaw4ri.com. That's MCGAW, the number 4RI.com. And that lists a bunch of my issues. It talks about where I stand on those issues. But certainly if there is an issue that you feel passionate about and it's not represented on the website, please reach out to me. My email is mcgaw4ri@gmail.com. That's MCGAW number 4RI@gmail.com. Or they can reach me by phone at 401-250-3571. And I'd be happy to talk with them.
Frank, did we miss anything?
I don't think so. And Michelle, we went through a lot of topics, and it's an interesting position to be in. I wish you luck in the election. And there are, I think, in this race in particular, the differences between the two candidates are pretty clear, and so people have a real choice to make.
Okay. That was the goal. Let's give them an option.
All right. So
Very
we
good.
encourage everybody. And Michelle, thank you very much, and very best of luck next week and in the coming days. And we will chat with you very soon.
All right. Thank you so much.
All right. And that is Michelle McGaw, who is running for candidate for House District 71, Portsmouth, Tiverton, and Little Compton. And we thank her for joining us. We've had both Democratic candidates on to speak with us. You can see both their videos now up on whatsupnewp.com. Compare and contrast each candidate and their issues, etc., as well as many other races. So, Frank Prosnitz, that's the latest.
Yeah, it's an interesting race. Big differences. I would urge people, and as I do often, go to the Board of Elections, take a look at their campaign finance reports, see who's contributing, see where they're spending their money, and it tells you a lot. Particularly in this race, it'll tell you a lot about both candidates.
All righty. And that's going to do it for us for today. We are lining up more interviews in the coming days, weeks, and months. Of course, September 8th is the primary reason to go out and vote in every single community, every single district across the state. And then general election, November 3rd. So we're moving right along here. All right, Mr. Prosnitz. We will.
Do me a favor. Wish Jen a happy birthday.
I will do that, and I appreciate that. We'll actually be in District 71 for dinner tonight. So
There you go.
There we go. All right, Frank, until next time.
Take care.
All right. On behalf of Frank Prosnitz and myself and all of us here at What's Up Newp, we want to thank you for watching. We also want to thank Michelle McGaw for joining us here today. Again, she's a candidate for House District 71. She's a Democratic candidate, and she will face off against John Edwards the 5th next Tuesday. You can vote now at your local city town hall, and you can also vote by mail, or you can go on September 8th and vote in person. For our full election guide, you can find it all on whatsupnewp.com. We have candidate profiles, we have these videos, we have campaign announcements, and much more. So check it all out on whatsupnewp.com. We appreciate it. Have a good day.